We've known this crisis was coming for months or even years. Prison governors had been warning they were about to run out of space. So, with exceptions for sexual and serious violent offenders, thousands of prisoners will be let out early after serving 40% of their sentences.
You've been told that we must endure the early release of dangerous rapists and criminals on our streets. You've been told this Labour government had no other choice.
The walls are closing in. Literally. A devastating new report published by Parliament's Justice Committee in November 2025 has laid bare what insiders have warned about for years. Britain's prison system is not struggling. It is disintegrating. Prisons in England and Wales are operating at a 25% overcrowding rate as of March 2025. Some private prisons are crammed 31% above safe capacity. The population stands at approximately 87,000 inmates, dangerously close to the operational ceiling. Male prisons recorded occupancy rates as high as 99.7% between October 2022 and August 2024, for exceeding the 95% safety threshold. This is not temporary strain. This is systemic collapse. Nearly 40,000 prisoners were released early between September 2024 and June 2025 under emergency measures designed to prevent the entire system from imploding. Sentences were slashed. Release points moved from 50% to 40% served. Courts delayed sending convicted criminals to jail because there was simply nowhere to put them. And it is about to get worse. Government projections forecast the prison population will hit between 98,000 and 103,600 by March 2030. That is an increase of up to 16,000 inmates in a system already bursting at every seam. Why does this matter? Because the consequences are already catastrophic and measurable. Prisoners are locked in cells for 22 hours a day. Many have no access to showers, fresh air, or rehabilitation programs. Violence inside prisons surged 14%. Assaults on staff jumped 19% as of September 2024, and those figures worsened by March 2025. 80% of all crime in England and Wales is reoffending. The Justice Committee report states this plainly. The system designed to rehabilitate offenders is instead creating better criminals. Half of all prisoners are not engaged in education or work despite high levels of need. 75% of prisons inspected by Ofsted in 2024 to 2025 were rated inadequate or showing no improvement. The human rights implications are stark. MPs on the Justice Committee said they were shocked by dire living conditions and warned that prisons may be violating human rights legislation. Buildings are in a state of disrepair. Infrastructure is broken. There is a £1.8 billion maintenance backlog with only £520 million allocated. The gap is unbridgeable without urgent intervention. This is not just a prison crisis. This is a public safety emergency waiting to explode. How did Britain arrive at this moment? The timeline is damning. For decades, the prison population grew relentlessly. It doubled over the past 30 years, climbing from 44,500 in 1993 to over 88,000 by 2024. Successive governments promised expansion. In the mid-2020s, ministers committed to delivering 20,000 new prison places. By September 2024, only 6,518 had been built. Completion is now delayed until around 2031 at a projected cost of £4.2 billion, 80% over budget. The National Audit Office warned of a looming shortfall of 12,400 places by the end of 2027. The Public Accounts Committee forecast capacity exhaustion early in 2026. That forecast is now reality. Labour inherited this disaster when it took power in mid-2024. The response was immediate and desperate. Operation Early Dawn and Operation Safeguard saw prisoners held in police cells and suspects delayed from appearing in court until space became available. The automatic release point was shifted from 50% to 40% of sentences for eligible prisoners starting in autumn 2024. Scotland followed suit with the 2025 Early Release Act, adjusting release thresholds to 40% for many short-term sentences. Nearly 40,000 prisoners walked free early under emergency schemes designed to buy time. But time is running out. The core allegation here is clear and brutal. Decades of underinvestment, short-term fixes, and political cowardice have created a permacrisis. The Prison Officers Association, which represents frontline staff, has been sounding the alarm for years. In an October 2025 statement, General Secretary Steve Gillen accused policymakers of deploying emergency solutions that undermine the system. He warned that sticking plaster measures come with consequences. License recalls surged 44%, with 77% due to non-compliance and 24% for further offences. Supervision systems are overwhelmed. The government promised reform. Labour's manifesto emphasised restoring order and making streets safer. Yet the infrastructure to deliver that promise remains threadbare. Youth offending institutions are failing to meet minimum education requirements. Children are locked up for extended periods with no access to schooling. The Justice Committee called conditions in youth custody deplorable and shameful. And there is a darker truth beneath the surface. Rehabilitation has been abandoned in favour of political expediency. Custodial sentences are handed down not because they work, but because they look tough. Reoffending rates remain stubbornly high, yet the response is more incarceration, not better intervention. The political pressure from this crisis is immense and accelerating. Labour is caught between opposing forces. The public demands safety and tougher sentences. Victims' groups want criminals locked up. But there is physically nowhere to put them. Early release schemes designed to ease overcrowding have unleashed a backlash. Opposition MPs accuse Labour of being soft on crime. Constituents in high-crime areas feel betrayed. Within Parliament, the debate is fracturing. Conservative MPs hammer Labour for failing to deliver the 20,000 prison places promised by the previous government. They accuse ministers of releasing dangerous offenders early to cover for systemic failure. Labour backbenchers, meanwhile, are nervous. They know their seats depend on delivering safety and stability. They know the statistics are worsening. The Justice Committee report, led by Labour MP Andy Slaughter, is scathing. It warns that the prison system is in a state of crisis mode, offering little real opportunity to turn around prisoners' lives. It calls for fast action to fix the basics and give greater attention to purposeful rehabilitation programs. But fixing the basics requires billions in funding that the Treasury is reluctant to commit. Building new prisons takes years. Reforming sentencing policy risks a political backlash. And time is running out before the next election cycle. To understand the scale of this failure, we must compare it to past crises in British penal history. In the 1990s, prison riots at Strangeways and other institutions exposed systemic brutality and neglect. The Wolf Report in 1991 called for sweeping reforms, better conditions, and respect for prisoners' dignity. Some changes were implemented. Conditions improved marginally. But the core problem, chronic overcrowding, was never solved. In 2007, the prison population hit a then record 82,000. The government responded with emergency releases and electronic tagging. Courts were told to consider non-custodial sentences. It eased the immediate pressure, but did nothing to address long-term capacity. Today's crisis is different. It is not riots or one-off emergencies. It is a slow, grinding collapse driven by decades of policy failure. The difference now is the sheer scale. Nearly 88,000 prisoners. A 25% overcrowding rate. Projections showing the population will hit 100,000 by 2030. And a maintenance backlog so severe that buildings are literally crumbling. The historical lesson is clear. Emergency measures provide temporary relief, but solve nothing. Without structural reform and massive investment, the cycle repeats. And each time, conditions worsen. The consequences of this crisis are immediate, long-term, and politically devastating. Short-term, public safety is compromised. Nearly 40,000 prisoners released early are back on the streets with minimal supervision. Recall rates are surging. Reoffending is endemic. Communities face rising crime, with a justice system unable to respond effectively. Prisons are no longer places of rehabilitation. They are warehouses where inmates are locked up 22 hours a day with no access to education, work, or mental health support. The Justice Committee report warns this undermines the very purpose of imprisonment. Prisoners leave more damaged, more dangerous, and more likely to reoffend than when they entered. Long-term, the damage is generational. A justice system that cannot rehabilitate creates a permanent criminal underclass. Families are destroyed. Communities are destabilized. Public trust in the rule of law erodes. Politically, Labour faces an existential threat. If crime continues to rise, if early releases lead to high-profile reoffending, if the prison system collapses entirely, voters will punish them mercilessly. The Conservatives are already weaponizing every statistic. The next election could be fought on law and order, and Labour is losing. This is not hypothetical. This is the arithmetic of political survival. Beyond party politics, this crisis strikes at the foundations of democratic legitimacy. When the state cannot incarcerate convicted criminals because there is no space, the social contract fractures. Citizens ask what they are paying for. They ask why the justice system cannot deliver justice. They ask why dangerous offenders are walking free while victims are ignored. The remand population is at its highest level in 50 years, comprising 20% of the total prison population. These are unconvicted individuals held in custody for months, sometimes over a year, awaiting trial. Many are eventually released directly from court with no support or intervention. The Justice Committee called this a serious concern and questioned how the government expects these individuals to avoid reoffending. The human rights implications are profound. Prisoners held in overcrowded, dilapidated conditions with no access to rehabilitation are being subjected to inhumane treatment. The Justice Committee warned that prisons may be in violation of human rights legislation. This is not just a policy failure. This is a moral failure. And when the state cannot meet its most basic obligation, to protect the public and rehabilitate offenders, legitimacy collapses. Democracies do not die through coups. They die through the slow erosion of trust in institutions. The most damaging revelation in the Justice Committee report is not any single statistic. It is the pattern of systemic failure across every metric. Overcrowding, 25% above safe levels. Violence, up 14%. Assaults on staff, up 19%. Reoffending, 80% of all crime. Education, 75% of prisons rated inadequate. Maintenance backlog, £1.8 billion. Funding allocated, £520 million. Every number tells the same story. The system is broken beyond repair without radical intervention. And the human cost is staggering. Women in prison face acute and complex health needs yet receive no basic support. Neurodivergent prisoners are not adequately supported. children in youth offending institutions are routinely denied the 15 hours of education per week they are entitled to by law. The public reaction has been swift and divided. Victims' groups are furious that nearly 40,000 prisoners have been released early. They demand tougher sentences and longer incarceration. Prison reform advocates argue the opposite, that mass incarceration has failed and alternatives are needed. But the government response has been muted. Promises of review, statements about tough action, no concrete funding commitments, no urgent timeline, no acknowledgement that the crisis is existential. The Prison Officers Association warned in October 2025 that the UK prison system is in a state of permacrisis. It called for real investment, meaningful reform, and coherent cross-government solutions. It said these are no longer optional. They are urgent. Here is the warning, and it must be heard clearly across Westminster and beyond. The UK prison system is days, not months, from complete collapse. The Justice Committee report is unequivocal. Conditions are dire. Rehabilitation is impossible. Reoffending is rampant. And the government has no credible plan to fix it. If current trends continue, if the population hits 100,000 by 2030 with no new capacity built, if overcrowding worsens, if violence escalates, the consequences will be catastrophic. Prisons will become unmanageable. Staff will walk out. Public safety will collapse. Labour has a narrow window to act. They must commit billions to prison infrastructure. They must reform sentencing to reduce reliance on incarceration. They must invest in rehabilitation, education, mental health, and addiction services. They must address the root causes of crime, poverty, exclusion, trauma. If they fail, the next report will be worse. The next crisis will be deadlier. And the political price will be annihilation. This is not just about statistics or capacity. This is about a justice system on the brink. This is about communities that deserve safety. This is about a democracy that must prove it can still function. The report is published. The data is clear. The crisis is undeniable. The question now is whether anyone in power has the courage, the vision, and the political will to do what is necessary before the entire system collapses.